Hello everyone and welcome to Torah L'Chayim with me, your host, Rabbi Anibal. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for inviting me into your homes, into your offices. Who knows where you are? Maybe you're driving your car. I hope not. I hope you're not watching a video and driving your car. That's illegal. So welcome to Torah L'Chayim, where we are going to study today a little bit more about Pirkei Avot in preparation for the Festival of Shavuot. No sound? No sound? Let's see. Testing. Seems that I have sound. If somebody can hear, let me know. Oh, Shelly said I have sound. Okay. Yeah, Shelly is on YouTube, and she has sound. I can try mine to see if YouTube has sound or not. I hope I won't get into a loop here, but let's see. Yep, my YouTube has sound. So Jerome is your speaker. It's your speaker. Who else is here? Jerome is here, of course. Shelly Chachinov, Thalma Sures. Welcome. If is anybody else there want to say hello in the chat, I would like to know who you are and where you're connecting from, because I said good afternoon and maybe it's morning where you are. Brenda Green Grossman is here. Facebook has sound. Good to hear it. Judy Shorak is here. Welcome. Good afternoon. Yeah, if you're in Winnipeg, it's afternoon. If you're on the Pacific Coast, I believe it's not afternoon yet. Will be morning. Depends on what time of what part of the world you're connecting, right? You never know. You see, Brenda is here from Plano, Texas, but I believe it's at the same time, right? It's 12:07 p.m. Plano, Texas. Let me know. Let me know. Thelma Thuris, you said you have no sound? That would be odd. You have sound now. Okay, good to hear. Facebook sound, YouTube no sound. What's going on? My YouTube was perfect. I just tried it on my phone. Maybe it's because of the app. I don't know. Technology. By the way, today after Torah L'Chayim, I have like 30 minutes to rest, and then I'm going to be part of a panel on I can't even remember the name of what I'm participating. It's a panel about the different houses of worship and the respond during the pandemic. Let me see here. I got it. What would it be? So I call it round table. It's an interfaith. Here, challenges posed by the pandemic and many things. So I'm talking about streaming. And it's going to be interesting. They gave me only 5 minutes. 5 minutes to me to talk about streaming. Can you believe it? I don't know how I'm going to do that. How can I put it together? Everything that we have done at Shari Zedek during the pandemic with all the streaming and broadcast, and I had to put it all in 5 minutes. God help me to do that. Otherwise, I don't know. They're going to unplug my computer. I don't know what I'm going to do. Never met these people before, but I'm always excited to share what we do in Winnipeg or how we did it. I am very proud of our team at the Shari Zedek and all the thing that we've done in the last 2 years. It's been the challenge, and we accepted the challenge, and we did great things. We changed a few things, enhanced it and other things, and here we are. Now we are studying Torah online. This is, by the way, if you just joined us, we are dedicating. Shelly, no, you can't tune in. I don't know. It's I'm not even sure what part of Canada this is being hosted. It's yeah. Anyway, so we are studying Pirkei Avot. Why is that? If you just joined our class, this is an idea that I had to help us prepare for Shavuot. The whole idea that what the rabbis say is that there are many things, many traits of characters that we have to develop and we have to improve even before the festival where we receive the Torah. The Torah can take us to the next level. Okay, but first there are certain basic things that we have to work out inside ourselves even before we even qualify to receive the Torah. So this is the idea. We tap into the wisdom of the rabbis. We tap into the wisdom of Pirkei Avot to help us understand other aspects of Jewish life that has little to do with Jewish law, but has lots to do with traits of characters and how to become better people even before we receive the Torah. So that's the thing. Amparo is here. Amparo Goldman, welcome. Welcome to the class. Okay, so today's class is going to be dedicated to two specific Mishnayot from Pirkei Avot. And hi Priscilla, welcome. And the common theme of the two is something that I like to call good deeds. Good deeds. And how important it is that we find a way to perform good deeds in our lives. Okay? Roberto Franco is here from Puerto Rico. Welcome. Welcome. What time is in Puerto Rico, Roberto? I never remember if we are in the same time zone or not. Never remember. Just let me know and I will highlight the answer. Okay, so we are going to study as an introduction to this topic. Let me bring it here. Avot, Pirkei Avot, chapter 3, Mishnah number 11. Okay? This is a Mishnah presented by... Oh, you see, we are 1 hour ahead in Puerto Rico. 1 hour ahead. It's 1:11 and here in Winnipeg is 12. Well, 12 now, but yeah. Okay, great to know. I'll try to remember for the next time. So, Avot 3:11, it says, Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza says, anyone whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom endures. And anyone whose wisdom precedes his fear of sin, his wisdom does not endure. Okay, take a second, read it again, and we are going to analyze in a minute this Mishnah. But before we do that, we need to know who was Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza. You know that I like to do that. It's not just to present the Mishnah. I like to also present you a little bit of information about the rabbi who said those words. In this case, we know who he was. It was Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza. Why I say in this case? Because you will see that there are many other Mishnayot in Pirkei Avot that they are anonymous. The second one for today is anonymous. We don't know who wrote it. But this one we know was Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza. So who was he? Well, first thing, I would say good news. If you are in Israel, you can go and visit his tomb. You can go visit his burial place. In fact, sometimes people go and pray there. He's supposed to be a miracle worker. Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza. So let me read for you. Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza was a first century Jewish scholar and miracle worker who lived in the Galilee, attracted by the fame of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Remember Yochanan ben Zakkai? This was the guy who escaped the siege of Jerusalem and opened a yeshiva in the city of Yavne. He was the one who reshaped, or actually shaped, rabbinic Judaism the way we know it today. So the guy's fame was something else, right? He attracted many people from all over the land of Israel to study with him. Actually, there were many opportunities to study back in the day. Many scholars died by the Romans. Some others died during the siege of Jerusalem in their internal fights with the zealots. They were tough times for Judaism back in the day. But in this case, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, great scholar, Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza heard about him, and he actually came to study with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Okay? So, according to legend, he served as an example of Sabbath observance, and there he and his wife were buried. So Shabbat observance in this day, you know, when somebody's super religious, we usually call it Shomer Shabbat. somebody who keeps Shabbat. It's a symbol, so that the way you keep Shabbat, it will tell what kind of Judaism you follow. That's the expression. That's when somebody is religious, it's a Shomer Shabbat. That implies that fulfills all the other commandments. So in this case, we have somebody who was very meticulous in the way he observed Shabbat, and he went to great length to be sure that he will not violate any of the Shabbat rules. Let's continue. While he is reckoned among the Tanaim, remember who the Tanaim were? Trivia questions already. Tanaim were the one who wrote the Mishna. Okay, if you were among the rabbis at the time of writing the Mishna, you were a Tana, singular. Tanaim, plural. So this rabbi was clearly, because you also see 1st century, so that's the time where the Mishnah was written. So he was a Tana. Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza was a Tana. So while he's reckoned among the Tanaim, as he's quoted in connection with the school and his disciples, no halachot but few agadot are preserved as from him. So in other words, I guess he was not famous for teaching halakha necessarily. He didn't say anything new. So we don't have any rulings of Jewish law that came from the mouth of Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza. And if there are other things that the Mishnah presents are agadot, are things that they are not necessarily connected to Jewish law. They're just more like stories of these rabbis. Okay? Wise though, but he is remembered more for his conduct than for his halachic teachings. There are no laws quoted in his name, as I mentioned before. His popularity, however, which he enjoyed throughout his life, and which render him immortal among the mystics, rest not on his scholarship, but on his saintliness and miraculous powers. So in other words, people didn't come to him to study Torah. I guess there were plenty of rabbis to study Torah from. They came to him because he was a role model in many other aspects. The way he conducted his life. Maybe the way he prayed, the way he interacted with other people, and all the things that he did more than what he said. Is that clear? This is very important to understand, because then when we go back and read again the Mishnah from Pirkei Avot, then you can understand it from his point of view. Right? Let's read it again. Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza says, anyone whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom endures. And anyone whose wisdom precedes his fear of sin, his wisdom does not endure. So basically what he says here, we are going to talk in a minute about fear of sin. What does it mean, fear of sin? If you have an idea, if you have a theory, please type it in the chat. I want to know what you think fear of sin means here. But it's clearly related to action. Okay? Clearly related to action. So here we have two concepts. One is action, then one is wisdom and study. And according to Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza, this kind of action or specific set of actions or actions made in a specific way was more important than wisdom. It's almost like a prerequisite, something that is necessary for wisdom and not the other way around. This is exactly what we are trying to understand here when we prepare ourselves for Shavuot. Shavuot means the time where we receive the Torah. Torah representing wisdom. I said, you have to prepare yourself for that wisdom to be able to exist. So we prepare ourselves. So this is exactly what Rabbi Hanina Mendeloza is trying to say here. But then when you go and read about what kind of life he lived, then say, yeah, he was a living example of this principle. Living example. People didn't come to him for his wisdom. He came to him to learn how to live life imbued with this fear of sin, whatever that means. Okay? Very important. Very important. Priscilla, here you have a theory. What do you say? Let's see. Fear of sin might be your actions are not acceptable, honorable, and goes against Torah. Okay, but why would you say we use the word fear? Okay, fear. In Hebrew, you hear, it says irat chet o, or irat het. Irat is fear, and het is transgression, is sin. Jerome, you say fear of sin. Narrow your actions, do not sin when doing it. Okay, very interesting. So, if you ask me here what I think it means, I think fear of sin means to be aware of what you do to the point of you are measuring consequences. Because sometimes people do things and they don't think about how those things will affect others. Even if you think that you're doing something good. Sometimes you think you're doing something good, but you are not realizing all the consequences of your actions. Many people go through life like that, without thinking of the impact that their actions will have in other people. Actions, words, etc. The impact that it will have. So I believe here when he's saying fear of sin, it means, well, if you don't realize that whatever you do will have a consequence on other people or on other things, whatever, you have a problem. So you have to constantly be aware that every action has a reaction. Okay? So that is what I think. But now we're going to talk more about that in a minute. Okay? Now, let me present to you the first opinion from a rabbi about this. And this is from a rabbi called Joseph Stern. And he says as follows. The Mishnah is describing the proper sequence of two different approaches to Avodat Hashem. You know what is Avodat Hashem? It's like the service to God. Service to God, or doing God's will, if you wish. Okay, two concepts, fear and love, he says. Because you know that we always say that the most important thing is love your God. You have to do everything with love, with a good heart. That's all good. But how do you achieve that? Well, he said in order to fully appreciate Hashem grandeur and to love God, one must first acquire a considerable amount of wisdom. The Mishnah is encouraging us to commence our relationship with God even prior to fully comprehending the many wonders in the universe. On the contrary, the best assurance that we will eventually come to love Hashem, to love God, and understand God's manifold wonders is to first fear Him. If we follow the Mishnah's recommended sequence, fearing God, even without comprehending God's management of the universe, we may rest assured that we will ultimately come to an even higher level of Avodat Hashem based on love. It is this potent combination, wisdom, an in-depth understanding of Hashem's way, which is based on a foundation of simple fear of Hashem, that will, as the Mishnah continues, endure. So let me explain this. I believe that what he's saying here is that yes, the ultimate goal is to love God. So if the ultimate goal is to love God, why will say it fear in the Mishnah? Well, because fear seems to be an entry level to the journey that eventually ends with us loving God. At least until we have time to understand things better. Because this rabbi will say here, it's very difficult to reach the level of loving God if you don't really understand too many things. So it's easier to develop at the very beginning this feeling of fear, so eventually you give yourself the opportunity to develop love for God, which is at the end of the day the ultimate goal. But remember, this is just the preparation. Just the preparation. So what do you think about the rabbis of the words of Rabbi Yosef Stern? Well, let me know in the chat. I want to know your reactions to these words. Now, hello Denise, welcome. Welcome to the class. Well, you missed a few minutes, but don't worry. And remember everyone, tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to restream this class. So if you're around, you can play it back from the beginning. Okay, so while you think about what I just mentioned here, let me continue with another commentary here. It's a different rabbi. This is going to be from the Sefat Emet. And it goes like this. To appreciate the pitfalls of wisdom without fear of Hashem, we turn to the wisest of all men, King Solomon, who wrote, "For with much wisdom comes much grief," or much pain, depends on the translation that you read. It's a very interesting concept. When an individual's fear of Hashem and his capacity for good deeds are exceeded by his wisdom, then he is particularly prone to commit averot, sins, and consequently anger Hashem, anger God. In this light, we can appreciate why the earth feared Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. So, yeah, there is this concept that when God was revealing the Torah, the whole earth trembled with fear. Why is that? Well, let's see. This is, it is presented in the Talmud. Why is that? Because, for example, in Psalms 76:9, it will say, "You pronounce sentence from heaven, the earth grows silent with fear." And this is referring of the giving of the Torah, Shavuot. While nature certainly welcomed the giving of the Torah, it feared that mankind will abuse the wisdom that it was about to receive. According to the Midrash, this is in Yalkut Tehillim, the earth reasoned as follows. Okay? If Adam, who was commanded to perform one mitzvah, nonetheless abused his relationship to Torah by partaking of the tree of knowledge, certainly the Jewish people exposed to the entire spectrum of Torah and mitzvot will be likely to sin by expressing its fear that Klal Israel, the people of Israel, will not observe the Torah that it was about to receive. The earth not only articulated its concern, but also simultaneously helped to mitigate, as our Mishna assures us, anyone whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom, the effect of Klal Israel being exposed to wisdom of Torah. When fear of sinning, as evidenced by the earth prior to Matan Torah, precedes wisdom, the giving of the Torah itself, we can be assured that the wisdom will remain intact. So this is amazing. So basically what it says here is, how can I express this? And it's happening with any kind of thing that we can learn. Any kind of thing that we can learn. That we are always prone to abuse whatever kind of information or whatever kind of skill, whatever kind of expertise we have. And this is something that, for example, scientists know it very well. When they are discovering something new, there is always somebody says, okay, slow down. What are the consequences of that? We saw that with electricity, with atomic energy. That sometimes I will say the fear of consequences will helped us to do things the proper way. If we don't have any fear of consequences, then it's an invitation for disaster. And we know this now with any new technology that we have, that we always analyze the pros and the cons. That kind of mental exercise that we have with everything that we do is, I believe, what here is referred to as fear of sin. Is stopping for a second and to analyzing what is going to happen. So the same thing here in the words of the Midrash, where God is revealing the Torah, and then the entire earth said, what are they going to do with this Torah that's been revealed? Are they going to do something great, or they are going to use that information to try to support holy wars and oppressing other people in the name of God and so forth? Misusing it, if you wish. The earth, so to speak, was worried. The earth was in fear of what we will do with this holy book. And the earth was right. History proved the earth in this Midrash right. Because the Torah, not just the Torah, I will say many of the holy books as well, and we all know that, have been used to justify evil, if you wish. So sometimes we have to be concerned and afraid of what could happen if we misunderstand or misuse the wisdom of Torah. So let's see. Denise, what do you say here? They will be afraid if it will be lost or compromised. I will say more compromised, because this is what we do sometimes. We compromise the principles, we corrupt the principles, and we misuse it. The Torah was given to do good. But then you said, well, if the Torah was given to do good, how it's possible that we have so much bad done in the name of Torah in the past, the name of the Bible? How is that possible? Because there was no fear of sin. Lots of wisdom, though. Lots of wisdom. We have, lots of men of wisdom had spoken in the name of the Bible, in the name of God, and bad things happened. Bad things happened. So I believe this is what the Mishna is saying. This is what the Mishna is saying. The fear of sin. Some kind of fear of sin. Fear of sin could take many different shapes, but that has to be present before we can even start talking about wisdom. That's my understanding. But yeah, Denise, you call it compromising the principles. Yeah, could be. I want to know your comments, guys. Let me know what you think, as I will continue now with the next text. Now, this is what the Ramban has to say about this kind of fear of sin. Okay? Denise, you also say fear can be used to separate. Yeah, to many different things, but I think that's a kind of different fear. This is about imposing fear in another person. That is a different thing. I'm talking about here the fear that we feel when we're about to do something, and we are afraid. What if what we do is going to be bad? And I believe what the Mishna said is, when you know that feeling of being a little bit afraid before you do something, that things may go bad, is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to approach thing with that thing inside, that little voice that is talking to you before you do something. It will help you to measure consequences. Okay, so let's see what the Ramban has to say. Ramban, remember who he was? Maimonides, physician, scientist, and philosopher in the Middle Ages. Okay? Yeah, he said, a person should be trained when he's young in proper ethical and social behavior until it becomes second nature to him. Then, when he reads books and other sources of knowledge and learns that this is the correct way to act, he naturally feels attracted to this positive behavior as depicted in the books, because it validates what his earlier training had so strongly emphasized. This will also lead him to desire to study and learn more about this behavior. Whoa, what a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing. Before I continue with the next paragraph, let me summarize what I think he's saying here. It's saying that we always read books, any books, we always read it with a bias. If you think that you can read something without a bias, I don't believe you. I think we all have bias. And what he says here, Maimonides, is that there are some positive bias. If I can teach my child, my son, right, to read everything from a positive point of view, from a perspective of inclusion, of goodness, of helping others. And then what happens is, as you start reading, that's what you're going to start finding there. And there are theories about that. I was reading something about it the other day, when you learn a new word. And it happens to me all the time because English is not my first language. So once in a while, I'm still learning new words. And then once I learned a new word, I start hearing that new word everywhere. It's not that I never heard it before, but I never pay attention because probably I didn't know it. So now that I know it, I start hearing it everywhere. Like it was the first time that somebody started to use it. I said, what a coincidence. Now everybody's using the word. No, it's not a coincidence. And it's because there are certain things that will condition what we hear, what we see when we listen to a lecture or we read a book. So it's good to teach our kids some positive bias that they will take with them when they engage into Torah studying. It's fantastic. I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing. Michael Legoff is here. Welcome to the class. Welcome to the class. I'm okay. You like it. Very nice. See Sam Bailey. Welcome. Welcome to the class. Okay. Thelma Sures, what do you say? Let me see, Thelma. I think it happens to all of us, even those with first languages. Okay, as English. Yeah, I bet it happens to you that you learn a new word and then all of a sudden everybody's using it. It's yeah. Let's see, Denise. You said everyone has new opinions on how they feel about the commandments or new feelings when they read the Psalms. And I think, yeah, new opinions, but we always have bias. Bias are very difficult to change, modify, adjust, improve. It's very difficult. So the best solution is when we have kids and we have to teach them to teach them positive bias, things that we know that they are good for the world. You will see that there are many cultures that they will instill evil on kids from very little, and then we are surprised that their outcome. We shouldn't be surprised if they become aggressive, because that's all they learned as valid. Okay, so Maimonides will say, back to the beginning of the text, a person should be trained when he is young in proper ethical and social behavior. And then everything will be read with those eyes, with ethical and social behavior. Okay, so let's continue with the second paragraph. So Maimonides says that this concept that we were talking about applies to irat shamayim, fear of heaven. So in other words, this is fear of God, but I understand fear of God as this feeling that we don't want to disappoint God, the fear of disappointing the God who gave us the Torah. Okay, so this applies to irat shamayim, fear of heaven. If a person is trained in irat shamayim even before he's able to study Torah, then when he eventually learns Torah, he will have a strong attachment and love for Torah knowledge and wisdom. Similarly, it is crucial to train a child in proper midot. Midot are traits of character. Okay? So it said train your child when they are little in proper traits. For example, saying thank you when he or she is very young, even if they don't understand why they are acting that way. Then when they learn Sifrei Musar, ethical works, they will see how the Torah espouses their derech achaim, way of life. This will create a great affinity and appeal for more Torah knowledge. Again, it's all about the bias. When we learn all these values when we are little, and then you start studying Torah and you see how those values are present there, and then you understand how those values are good for you and for the world, and you want to learn more. You want to learn more about it because you see the value of that. But it all starts with a good foundation of proper values, proper traits of characters. That it's something that we get from early age, either from our parents or from our teachers. That's why we all know that how important education is for the kids at home, and that's why we spend so much time and effort trying to find a good school for our kids, because we all know how important that early foundation is. Denise, you say, yeah, when you restudy Hebrew, you rediscover words that never thought about before. Yeah, absolutely. And Thelma, you said, totally agreed. It's fun, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. Let me present another opinion here, this time by Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. He said, this is the Kotsk Rebbe, the Hasidic Rebbe. When performing a mitzvah, we receive an infusion of fear of heaven. Okay? Those individuals whose perspective on life is defined solely by intellect, unseasoned by fear of heaven, frequently experience a conflict with this incremental dose of fear of heaven. As a result of this clash, the individual becomes confused and is unable to retain his wisdom. Interesting. On the other hand, the individual whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom is able to integrate the fear of heaven that he received from performing mitzvot with his intellect. Fear of heaven here, I believe there is this sense of connection with God. And the more you practice the mitzvot, the more you practice the commandments, that gets stronger and stronger. But we have to get used to that as well. Otherwise, it could be overwhelming. And Rabbi, the Kotsk Rebbe here would say that it is more important first to develop that fear, that feeling of connection with God, even before we want to increase in these intellectual activities. It's a very, very interesting concept. Now, let me bring you now another perspective of another Rebbe. This one, Rabbi Avram Mordechai Alter, he will say, I find an allusion in this Mishna to the rabbinic decree that when Rosh Hashanah occurs on Shabbat, the shofar is not sounded. You know that? We'll talk about it in a minute. Though blowing the shofar is depicted by Hazal. Hazal, by the way, now that I said this word, if you study Torah, you're going to start reading or listening to this word everywhere. Hazal. I remember when I learned it. Hazal means Chachameinu Zichronam Livracha, which means our sages of blessed memory. Hazal. Okay? It's, for example, at the end, and it's everywhere. Hazal. So basically here, when you say Hazal, you are not referring to one rabbi, you are referring to many rabbis. Sometimes we say in English, as the rabbis teach. I guess instead of as the rabbi teach, the proper way of saying it is Hazal taught, or Hazal said. Our rabbis, our sages of blessed memory. Okay, so let's go again. Though blowing the shofar is depicted by Hazal as an act involving great skill, the chokhmah, okay? You also may have heard the word chokhmah if you study Kabbalah. But this here is the chokhmah is the intelligence applied to a skill, okay? We refrain from sounding the shofar on Shabbat out of fear, ira, that we may carry the shofar for 4 cubits in a public thoroughfare. So this is very interesting, and this is absolutely true. We have the biblical obligation to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. It's a biblical obligation. But there is also a biblical prohibition that you cannot carry anything from private to public property unless you have an eruv in your city, which, by the way, that's a rabbinic innovation, that kind of eruv. But it's kosher. So in Winnipeg, for example, we do have an eruv. So there is no problem to take things from private property to public property during Shabbat. But if you don't have an eruv, then you cannot carry anything. You can't even carry the keys for your house. So there are many cities where Jews go to synagogue and they have to leave their doors unlocked. Or they leave a spouse or a child behind at home. And whenever they come back, they have to yell, "Hey, open the door. I'm back." If you're afraid that somebody's going to break into the house. But Halacha says that you cannot carry anything on Shabbat. Not even, for example, the prayer book or the talit. I don't know if you've ever seen this in some cities that they don't have an eruv. When they go to Shabbat, to services, you will see the men will wear the talit in their way to synagogue. Why is that? Because you are wearing it, you're not carrying it. That's a nice loophole, right? You can wear it, but you cannot carry it. Fine. So, but if it's raining, you cannot carry an umbrella. So you have to wear a cape or something like that. But yes, it's a prohibition. So even though the shofar is something that we have to blow on Rosh Hashanah, the Rabbi decided that we don't do it if it's Shabbat. Why? Out of fear that maybe somebody will forget that on Shabbat you cannot carry anything. And the person will carry their shofar to synagogue because the person will be all excited to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And then somebody will tell him at the synagogue, "Why did you bring the shofar? It's Shabbat." I forgot. So out of fear that might happen, we don't do it. And here, Rabbi Abraham Mordechai Alter, he said he can actually see how the Mishna is reflected here in this ruling. Why? Because he will say that the blowing of the shofar, because it involves great skill, represents the chokhmah, the wisdom. And not carrying thing of Shabbat represents the ira, the fear. So you will see how fear came before wisdom. Prohibition of not carrying it came before the blowing of the shofar. It's Telma Suris, you'll say, what about wearing the key around your neck or pinning it into your jacket? Yes, then you're wearing it. Those are loopholes. How do you say it in Yiddish? It's a kunz. I think it's a kunz, and they always do like this with the finger when they say it. Yeah, they are. Yeah. Michael Legov, you said, I didn't know that. What is our eruv? All around the city. There was a study made that the electric grid in Winnipeg goes all around the city. It's not completely closed, but it was closed at one point. So now we have an eruv. So the entire city of Winnipeg, it does have an eruv. Very interesting. Okay, so, and let's continue now with the next avot that I have for you. Remember, I told you at the beginning, we're going to center today in only 2 Mishnayot. The next one is from Pirkei Avot chapter 3, Mishnah number 12. And this one is anonymous. And I also mentioned that the first one was from Mendeloza. This one is anonymous. We don't know who said it. And it said, he will also say, anyone whose actions are more plainful than his wisdom endures. And anyone whose wisdom is more plainful than his wisdom does not endure. Okay? This is related to the previous one, and it's also talking about action. Okay? I believe the first one was also action with precaution. Not just action, but also measuring consequences. This one is specifically about doing things versus studying. And it will open a different kind of debate. What is more important, to do or to know? According to this Mishnah, to do is more important than knowing. Because if you don't do, who cares what you know? It's like as I heard before, the expression, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. It's pretty much this Mishna, different words. Okay? So, let's read a comment about this. Again, Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib Alter. What did he say? He said, it seems that the Mishnah is setting an impossible standard for us to follow by stating his good deeds exceed his wisdom, that we should observe mitzvot even if we are barely aware of their existence. Perhaps it is referring to the importance of observing mitzvot, although we do not comprehend the underlying rationale. A prime example of this trait, observing even without understanding the purpose of a mitzvah, was Klal Israel's declaration at Sinai when they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will perform mitzvot, Na'aseh, and only subsequently we will study their underlying rationale, Nishma. Well, in this case, this rabbi decided to understand the Mishnah as talking only about doing or performing mitzvot. Okay? So let's go back here. He will say, anyone whose actions are more plainful than his wisdom. Okay? In this case, he decided to understand ma'asav, actions, as mitzvot, doing, performing the commandments. And again, what is more important? To study Judaism or to do Judaism? They say, well, I'm not going to do anything that I don't understand. Then most likely you will never do anything. If you are going to do only the mitzvot that you understand, then chances are that you will never do pretty much anything according to Jewish law. And that is a problem, because I will say that is the main problem with 21st century Jews, that they will refuse to do anything they cannot understand why they are doing it. There are many things. Remember, in the Torah we have two main categories of commandments, mishpatim and chukim. Mishpatim are the logical mitzvot, the ones that, of course, everybody fulfills because they're logical. But the funny thing with those is that they are not necessarily exclusive of Judaism. Those are things that everybody, any decent society, will observe. Right? If you read in the Torah, you shall not kill, you shall not murder. Come on, do you really need the Torah to tell you that? Of course you're going to fulfill that one because it's logical. But there are other things in the Torah, like for example, when the Torah will say, and when that was last week, we read it on Kedoshim, when we read about the prohibition of wearing shatnez. Shatnez is the mixture of wool and linen in the same garment. We are not allowed to do that. You tell me, who observes that? Who actually checks the labels of their clothing to be sure that they are not wearing shatnez, that there is no blend of wool and linen? Well, who cares? That doesn't make any sense. But exactly, that's what the chukim are. Commandments that they make no sense. Kashrut. That will be the main reason for people say, I don't care about the dietary laws in Judaism because they make no sense. Of course they don't. Of course they don't. I know that rabbis try to explain why we do it, but that's not sometimes you won't find a reason. There is no reason why. Or, somebody will tell you a reason and you will find a way to say, no, you're wrong. Which is probably right. But it's there are many things like that. So I believe what it says is sometimes in Judaism, the practice of Judaism involves doing things that we don't understand. If we are going to put the wisdom before the action, it means first I try to understand, and then I do. Most likely we will never do anything. Yeah. Denise, you say here, sounds like a first world problem, but for some, it's a confidence builder. I miss, what are you talking up there? I don't know which one of the comments you're referring to. Interesting. Shelley Jachinov, you said that there are rabbis in the Orthodox world who check the label's garment to ensure that the garment is kosher. Yeah, in fact, the very first time that I've seen something like that was on my very first trip to New York. You know, if you come from South America, and I'm talking about here, probably 30 years ago. 30 years ago. I went to New York for the first time. Of course, you want to go to a Judaica. I remember back then I went to Levin Judaica in Manhattan. I don't think it exists anymore. Now the online Judaicas killed all these little shops. And they had a poster there with a phone number and address if you wanted to take. It was a lab. It was a shatnez lab. You can take all your clothing there and they will actually analyze to tell you if there is any kind of mixture. Any kind of mixture. Michael, you say, oh, you can't reapply your makeup. Okay. I see, Denise. So that's what I discovered about the shatnez. I went to study it. Nobody ever talked to me about shatnez before. So I went and I did a little research what it was. And then I realized, I said, well, but who will mix wool and linen? Wool is something we wear in the winter. Linen is something very light we wear in the summer. And then, I realized that if you have, for example, a linen jacket, chances are that there is wool in the threads they use to attach the buttons to the linen jacket. And there you go, how easy it is to mix the two. Okay, but I don't want to get stuck in there. You know what I mean. Let's continue with another comment about the second Mishnah. Listen to this. I suggest a novel approach to the relationship developed in this Mishnah. Let us assume that the prefix me, as in me chochmato, means because of rather than greater than. Okay, so let me go here. Let me show you what this Rabbi is talking about. It said, Hu haya Omer kol shema'asav meruvin me chochmato, right here, right? Chochmato mitkayemet. It was said, anyone whose actions are more plainful than his wisdom endure. Okay, so the Hebrew is me chochmato, me chochmato. So now we can go back. I suggest a novel approach to the relationship developed in this Mishnah. Let us assume that the prefix me, as in me chochmato, means because of rather than greater than. According to this approach, the Mishnah is praising the individual who is able to perform numerous good deeds. Ma'asav merubim. Merubim is quantity. Because of his determination to utilize his wisdom, me chochmato, for the primary purpose of doing Hashem's will. Such an individual will merit to retain his wisdom. On the other hand, an individual who performs good deeds for the sole purpose that he merit increased wisdom will not retain such wisdom. This individual is suffering from confused priorities, perceiving wisdom as an objective in itself, whereas in reality, it is only valuable as a means of serving Hashem. So what an amazing thing. What an amazing thing. Let's go back here and let's read it in the way that this rabbi is suggesting. He will say that we should read it. Anyone whose actions are plainful because of his wisdom. So isn't that amazing when we could reach a level that we do more things because we know and we understand the impact or the benefits that those good actions will have in other people. When we understand that, of course, that everything is going to have a better chances to succeed. Because at the end of the day, God gave us the brain we have, and we have to use it properly. We have to use it properly. I know sometimes we say, follow your heart. Yeah, follow your heart, but bring your brain along the way. That is always a good thing. Follow your heart, but bring your brain along the way. Talmud Suris, you say, yeah, Jane Levine is closed. I heard about that, yeah, but West Side Judaica, uptown Manhattan, is still open. The other day I actually found a bag from Levine's Judaica. I did it. Yes, I found one. So, let's see. We have 1 minute. Maybe I can read one more and we finish with that. I always like to the words of the Maharal of Prague, very Kabbalistic. And he said, we know that there are people in every nation whose wisdom exceeds their good deeds, and yet their wisdom endures. Contrary to this Mishnah, I love when somebody dares to contradict a Mishnah and still get away with it. And this is the Maharal of Prague. And he will say, okay, come on, give me a break. We all know that there are situations where the wisdom will endure regardless of the actions of the individual. Great for him. So why is that? He says, in their case, wisdom continues because they have an outstanding propensity towards wisdom. You see, the Talmud says that a person is born with a certain propensity for wisdom, just as he is born with a certain propensity for strength, etc. Yeah, there is. I read that. It's a fascinating section of the Talmud where it's almost like a horoscope. That is, it depends when you are born. You will have different propensities. So it says that's the case. If you have a propensity towards wisdom, that prevails even without good deeds or the fear of sin. The Mishnah, however, addresses people in general and not the exceptions. We are experts. I said, yeah, well, but what about that specific individual? And here, Maharal of Prague said, yeah, come on, that's an exception. We are talking about here in general. Let's continue. It said, another approach to this question is to understand the term wisdom to mean the wisdom of Torah. Then the question does not even arise, because only the wisdom of Torah, which is divine, requires a spiritual foundation. Secular wisdom does not lead to God, and hence does not need spiritual support. Wonderful comment to say that, so we can have a better understanding. But summarizing, it's very important to study Torah. Shavuot is coming up. Studying Torah is very important, but even more important is what we do. And even more important, when you do something, we have to measure consequences. Because sometimes we want to do things, but we have to do things in a way that they are beneficial, not just for us, but also for other people. We cannot benefit ourselves at expense of other people. And I think that's very important. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for coming out today, for studying with me this afternoon. And remember, next week is Lag BaOmer. It's a very special moment in the counting of the Omer. It's the 33rd day, Lag BaOmer. I may even play the song that I recorded last year for Lag BaOmer. I will play it during the class. So we are going to study a little bit about Lag BaOmer, and then we are going to continue studying more Mishna to prepare ourselves for Shavuot. Hi, Andrea, you were around. So quiet today. Well, thank you, everyone, for all the comments. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.